For the Allies, Operation Jubilee was a costly failure. Despite this, many people involved in the planning and execution of the operation were allowed to distance themselves from the tragedy, or claim success to deflect blame and rationalize the losses. While some good may have come from the Dieppe operation in terms of meeting its strategic goals, we must remember that whatever they may have been, it would be wrong to associate the human waste of Dieppe with the Normandy successes. In April 1942, Allied tactical decisions to ramp up the scale of raids on Europe had a significant impact on RAF operations. This meant that as operations grew in scale, they would need to provide more support, primarily in the form of air cover. Thus, the RAF was able to continue pressing the Luftwaffe, while avoiding the Luftwaffe's strategy of drawing Allied fighters deep into Europe. Operation Jubilee was a direct continuation of the cancelled Operation Rudder, with important differences. The primary difference was that General Montgomery was confident that security had been compromised, as evidenced by the damage inflicted on the ships by German fighter bombers, while they were gathering in the Solent. Adding to his concerns was the fact that troops were given leave after the operation was abandoned on the 7th of July, leaving no doubt in his mind that a raid on Dieppe was compromised. On the 14th and 15th of August, 15 squadrons of aircraft and crews arrived to bolster the No. 11 Group. This brought the group's total aircraft count to 74 squadrons and its ammunition and gasoline reserves to 12.8 million rounds and 712,000 gallons, respectively. At 1800 hours on the 18th of August, pilots were summoned for a briefing on operations for the following day by the station and wing commanders, and by 2200 hours, all flight crews had retired for the night. The air campaign began on the morning of August the 19th at 0415 hours, with the arrival of 6 Douglas Boston bombers over Dieppe. The bombers' assigned target was to attack German coastal artillery units. This was followed by 14 Boston bombers from No. 226 Squadron laying down a smoke screen around the German artillery units on the eastern headlands, and 4 squadrons of Hurricanes coming in low over the beach, delivering cannon fire and bombing the gun batteries. By 0515 hours, the air operation had escalated, with No. 88 Squadron Boston bombers attacking gun batteries, while the Hurricanes worked on the beaches. At the same time, 7 Bristol Blenheim bombers from numbers 13 and 614 squadrons dropped phosphorus bombs on German flak sites that were inflicting heavy losses on Allied aircrews. At approximately 0800 hours, while the main assault was pinned down on the beaches, 2 squadrons of cannon-armed Hurricanes and 2 squadrons of Spitfires were diverted to engage enemy E-boats that had been reported heading south from Boulogne. Around 0926 hours, 2 squadrons of Hurricanes and 2 squadrons of Spitfires were ordered to attack positions on the western headlands and the houses behind the beach, due to the deteriorating situation. The following message was received at 0956 hours in response to the Air Force Commander's request for a situation report.
Situation too obscure to give useful report. Echo Operation Faultless. Enemy air opposition now increasing. Have you any questions?
Shortly after 10:30 hours, the force commanders realized that the Luftwaffe was about to gain the upper hand, and issued the order to withdraw. This triggered Operation Vanquish, the retreat from Dieppe, and the end of the raid. At the same time, a raid by 24 Fortress bombers from the U.S. 97th Bomb Group, and 4 squadrons of Spitfires, at 10:30 hours, against the Abbeville-Druckett Air Base, prevented the enemy from using the airfield for about 2 hours. Around 10:39 hours, an urgent request for maximum fighter support against gun positions on both headlands was made, and 4 squadrons of Hurricanes were assigned to provide close air support to the troops on the ground, while 2 squadrons of Spitfires were assigned to provide air cover. From 1040 to 1100 hours, No. 226 Squadron Boston bombers laid a dense smoke screen along the beachfront and headlands to cover the withdrawal of the troops. And as the Luftwaffe increased in strength, the Spitfire's ability to provide effective air cover over the assault force deteriorated. Hurricanes from No. 43 Squadron attacked the East Headland at 1115 hours to support troop withdrawals before returning to base, but were unable to respond to further requests from the main beachhead for ground support at 1135 and 1138 hours. By this point, the RAF was stretched to its limits, fully occupied with the Luftwaffe, and unable to assist the withdrawing troops. The arrival of the Hurricanes, at 1200 hours, coincided with the order given for the Typhoons charged with reconnaissance, to withdraw from the operational area and return to base. Isolated and without air support, they had suffered heavy losses. At about 1300 hours, the commanders on the beachhead realized that air support and evacuation were no longer possible, so they made the wise decision to surrender. With around 250 vessels returning to England, the Luftwaffe resumed their attacks in an effort to do as much damage as possible. And at 1305 hours, they hit and sank the destroyer HMS Berkeley. For Spitfire pilots flying their fifth sortie of the day, the protection of the returning fleet was the last challenge they faced. And from 0416 hours to 1545 hours, when the Luftwaffe had largely disengaged from the fight, they had provided effective and continuous air cover. Although the Luftwaffe's initial response was tentative, partly due to heavy fog covering the airfield at Abbeville, JG-26 entered the battle at 0600 hours and claimed its first kill of the day at 0645 hours. JD-2 arrived at 0645 hours with a small complement of FW-190s and BF-109s after completing a reconnaissance run to the northwest of Dieppe. Both JD-26 and JD-2 swiftly ran out of ammunition and were heavily outnumbered, so they withdrew from the field. JD-26 and JD-2 returned to the fight at 0700 hours, with around 30 FW-190s and BF-109s. Their goal was to focus on isolated ships, but this strategy was ineffective because they were still outnumbered, and although the FW-190s proved to be vastly superior throughout the day, the relentless pressure applied by the Spitfires mostly thwarted their intentions. The first Luftwaffe bomber, a Dornier Do-17 from KG-40, appeared around 0830 hours and started attacking the fleet. Now the Luftwaffe had around 50 aircraft in the air, and was starting to dominate the air campaign. By 1000 hours, Luftwaffe bombers, comprised of Do-17s, Ju-88s, and He-111s had arrived in force, and now had over 100 aircraft committed to the battle. At this point, British commanders recognized that the Luftwaffe had gained the upper hand, and not long after, launched Operation Vanquish. With Allied air cover failing, at 1100 hours, the Luftwaffe intensified attacks on the shoreline, with Ju-88s fitted with flamethrowers, in an attempt to halt the task force's withdrawal. At 1300 hours, with Allied troops abandoned on the beaches, the fleet turned towards England, and at 1305 hours, a small number of Dornier 217s broke through the RAF's air cover and attacked HMS Berkeley, exploding a bomb under the hull, and breaking her back. The harassment of the fleet and RAF air cover would continue until around 1545 hours. After this, the Luftwaffe disengaged from the battle. Following Jubilee, the RAF acknowledged the loss of 106 aircraft and 66 aircrews. Of these, 13 were captured and 53 were killed. The Luftwaffe acknowledged the loss of 48 aircraft and 14 aircrew deaths. Unfortunately, for the British assault force, the Germans had been warned about the British interest in Dieppe by their agents. They had also detected increased radio traffic, and reconnaissance had picked up the formation of an amphibious force in Britain's south coast ports. Add to that, the constant warnings in British newspapers, about coastal attacks on the French mainland during June and July of 1942 and the appearance in the Daily Telegraph crossword puzzle of the clue, French port followed by the solution, Dieppe, on August the 17th, it's no surprise that the Germans took sensible precautions against invasion between August 10th and 18th, when the tides supported an amphibious landing. According to the accounts of veterans, the German forces were ready when the landing crafts touched down on the shoreline, as they were immediately hit with precision, and Lieutenant Colonel Labat has stated that he saw range markers used for mortar training on the beach that looked as if they had just been placed. During the interrogation of captured soldiers, Major C.E. Page learned that 4 machine gun battalions had been drawn up to strengthen the defense of Dieppe, and that the Germans had been preparing for an assault for several weeks. These revelations raised the question of why General Montgomery's warning that operational security had been compromised was not heeded by Chief of Operations Mountbatten and Prime Minister Churchill. Could it be that the Royal Navy and Bomber Harris refused to commit capital ships or heavy bombers to the operation, as they all knew the game was up?